The fantasy season is in the books, so it is time to review and look ahead to 2025. We are going to walk through some of the key names from the 2024 draft class at the running back position and what we think about them moving forward. And of course, I've got one of the best names in the industry joining me to do exactly that. I'm joined by the fantastic Pat Fitzmaurice of Fantasy Pros to break down this rather interesting sophomore running back class. Pat, it's a very cold day in Chicago today. How are you doing?
Doing well, Rich. Yeah, we were just talking about this, how I just got back from a dog walk and only regained the capacity for speech a minute or so ago. It is a Arctic cold here in Chicago, but, it made it easier to stay inside today and do some work on the class of 2025, but I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. I know we're talking about the class of 2024 today. So
yeah, very, very, very easy, particularly with, I think, how good the running back class of 2025 is looking to get excited. But yeah, we are going to review the 2024 class. And I feel like when you're talking 2024 class, there's only one name you can start with, isn't it? It is Bucky Irving. Look, this time last year, I was so excited about Bucky Irving, the prospect. And then the combine happened, the draft happened where he fell. I kind of walked back to my excitement, and then he absolutely blew it out of the water. Were you a big fan of Bucky Irving coming out as a prospect, or were you like me that some of those red flags sort of tapered off that excitement?
no, I was definitely not on board with Bucky Irving. I was open to the possibility of drafting him in my dynasty rookie drafts, and then he ran that disappointing 40 time, 4.55, I believe, at 192 pounds, which is like a 27th percentile speed score. And I guess there is a lesson to this, Rich, because I was also scared off by Kyren Williams running a slow 40 time at sort of a lightweight. And maybe we should not be bailing out on smaller running back prospects who don't run good 40 times, because Bucky had almost 3,000 yards from scrimmage and 21 touchdowns over his final two college seasons at Oregon. I should have paid more attention to the tape than the combine results, and I'm regretting letting that slow 40 time keep me from drafting him in any rookie draft.
Yeah, I think hindsight's 2020 with all of these things, isn't it? I think we can all sit back and kind of pick holes in process and stuff. I think for me, I sort of saw the combine and I was like, okay, it not dings him a little bit, but I still like him. But as soon as the NFL were kind of out on him, I was like, oh, okay, well, if the NFL are out, I had this kind of red flag. That kind of tells me, and it was basically the same process as Kyren Williams, and yeah, exactly the same result, because I've sat with egg on my face and kind of thinking I should just stuck with the tape. But obviously he had a phenomenal season, over 1,000 rushing yards, interesting receiving usage, decent reception total, a little bit light on the yardage side of things. Do you think that we've seen, as the season went on, him slowly start to eat into that Rachaad White role to the point where, week 18 must-win game and the playoff game, it was, I don't even think you can call it 70-40. I think it's about 80-20 split in Bucky Irving's favor. Have you got any concern looking forward to 2025 about Rachaad White potentially hanging around and what that could mean for Bucky Irving moving forward?
Yeah, I'm not really concerned about the presence of Rachaad White anymore, Rich. And you sort of said it. We saw White's usage really curtailed late in the season. So White had played at least 48% of the offensive snaps in every game through week 16. Well, he missed a game, but every game he had played. Then in his last three games, including the playoff loss to Washington, Rachaad White's snap share was set 37% or lower. And this was actually Rachaad White's best season as a runner by basically every statistical measure. But by the end of the season, he was in a backup role, and deservedly so. I mean, what Irving did this season is just he blew me away by how good he was. Just extraordinary vision, great contact balance, the ability to string moves together, catches passes. I don't think this season was a fluke at all. He just looked too good for it to be a fluke.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a really interesting point you made there about the things that kind of separated him apart of, and I think it leads to sort of the transition we've had and seen in the NFL over the last probably 5 or 6 years of 5 or 6 years ago, where it was a lot of one high and it was, we needed athletes, outside zone was the kind of in vogue scheme, that kind of McVay Shanahan system. That was where it was all kind of perpetrated around. I want one cut runners that can get to the outside, hit the gap and go. And then Mahomes and Allen and this kind of passing offense taking over and saying, right, we need to limit explosives. Let's go too high. And I think that now it's a little bit less of reliance on athleticism and it's now vision, because it's not as straightforward in terms of the defensive schemes. We're having to get a little bit more inventive. It's not a case of, right, that guy's lined up over the B gap, he's going through the B gap. It's now, we've got mugged up looks and we've got all sorts of defensive schemes where guys are moving around all over the place. And so that vision is now so much more important than it probably was 5 or 6 years ago, because you're now having to decipher what is happening from a defensive standpoint, rather than just saying, I'm going to run to the outside, wait until a gap opens, plant my foot and go. And so I think certainly something I've learned over this past year is that I'm going to focus more on that vision piece and that kind of aspect of prospects moving forward. And I think that should hopefully stand Bucky Irving in really good stead. The offensive line is pretty much coming back next year. I know potentially Luke Gadecki, I think the right tackle's a free agent, so I imagine they probably bring him back. But with Graham Barton, he was phenomenal as a rookie. I think that offensive line is pretty solidified. The big one concern I've got is Liam Cohen. It feels like, and by the time this show comes out, he might have already been announced as a head coach. It feels like he could potentially be in with a shot of the Jaguars job or another head coaching spot. If Liam Cohen does go, does that knock any expectation or hopes for Bucky Irving at all?
I wouldn't like to see the departure of Liam Cohen if I were a Bucky Irving investor, but I don't think Cohen is the reason for Bucky Irving's success. I know some people were worried about how the Buccaneers offense would be this year without Dave Canales, and it turned out to be just fine. So I don't think Cohen's absence would completely devalue Bucky Irving or maybe just by the slightest fraction, but not too worried about it, because as you just talked about, I mean, the combination of vision and creativity with Bucky is just so off the charts. And this might seem like sacrilege, but there were times when I would watch Bucky Irving run, and he had these little moments where it was almost like watching Barry Sanders. It just sort of the jazz musician style of just being able to, see the play develop and improvise kind of and make whatever moves needed to be made at any given instant. So yeah, I don't want to make that comparison and lose my credibility, but there were definitely flashes of that at times with Bucky's game.
I think his ability to manipulate and set up defenders is what's amazing. Is that there's no wasted movement. He'll step to the right to make a defender step that way, knowing that opens up a cutback lane to the left, kind of thing. It's almost like he's sort of manipulating the defender to say, if I do this, you're going to do that, and that will give me a gap, which is Barry Sanders-esque, definitely. So moving forward to 2025 and beyond, we're looking at his current valuation. It is pretty wild to see running back 6 in keep trade cut. We're talking, they've got his valuation as an early to mid 2025 first. I mean, at that price, are you buying? Are you holding? Are you selling?
I think I'm holding. And I know that the way a lot of people like to play Dynasty, and generally, I mean, I kind of agree with this, that running backs are fleeting assets and don't hold their value as well as wide receivers. So if anyone hits on a running back, they're quick to try to flip them for a wide receiver. I don't know if that would be the case for me. I mean, you need running backs to win too. I had Bucky in one redraft league this year, and I won the championship in that league, and he was a big reason why. So I totally agree with that price. Early to mid, I was going through the rookie class and Superflex. I think yes, I'd rather have Ashton Genty. Yes, I'd probably rather have Tyrone McMillan, who's likely to be the number one wide receiver, and probably one or both of the two quarterbacks at the top of the list. But I would rather have Bucky than whatever is at 105. And I think 104 is probably the right price for him if you're looking to flip him for a pick.
Yeah. I think that's a fair valuation. I've just pulled up my cornerstone ranks, which is 2023, 2024, and 2025 class, and I've got him in the exact same tier as Cam Ward, Luther Burden, and Shador Sanders. So yeah, I'm in that, I guess, sort of 103 to 105 range in terms of his valuation. I do think the way some people have been talking recently and the way his value is, I wouldn't be shocked if you can get a better price than that in some leagues. Like I've seen the hype is real. So yeah, if you can get multiple first round picks, if you can maybe pivot to a slightly older back, can you go and get I'm trying to think, a Kenneth Walker or Josh Jacobs plus a first or something like that? I think that's an absolute home run deal. So yeah, I think if I'd have Bucky Irving, I'd like to hold, but I'd definitely be sniffing around the price because I do think the hype and the value is absolutely wild at the moment. But look, one guy that we were both slightly lower on to a guy that I absolutely loved, and I'm happy to say I've got an awful lot of shares of, Tyrone Tracy. He took a little bit of a while to win the job off Devin Singletary, and at the end of the year, I think potentially lost the job slightly. But do you think Tyrone Tracy is going to be the starting running back for the Giants in 2025, Pat?
I do think he will be. Yes, we should pay attention to whether the Giants add anyone at running back, but it doesn't seem like they'll make any significant additions. Clearly, they will want Tyrone Tracy to play a prominent role, and they also have Devin Singletary under contract at a pretty reasonable cost for another year, at least another year. So I like him too, Rich, and I've got him in a couple of leagues, and I'm not actively looking to sell him, although I'm certainly willing to listen to deals for him. I guess my only concern with Tyrone Tracy, and this is a minor one, but just maybe the eerie parallels between Tyrone Tracy and another running back I really liked a couple of years ago, Antonio Gibson. Both highly athletic, both former college wide receivers who converted to running back. They both had really promising rookie years. They both had fumbling issues early in their careers. And we saw Tyrone Tracy lose a little bit of playing time at one point this year because he was putting the ball on the ground. So I do like him a lot. I don't think we can say we're home yet, home safe as far as having a bankable asset for the next 2, 3, 4 years, but very encouraged by what we saw this year. I mean, he is extremely explosive, catches passes, and with all the work the Giants have to do, I don't think running back is going to be a priority for them in the offseason.
Yeah, and that's the point that I keep coming back to. I keep looking at it and thinking, right, Joe Shane is what's the verb for GM of coaching? He's GMing for his job for next year. Yes. And I think he needs to be able to sell to the Maras, look, these are the guys I've drafted, these are the guys that I've brought in that have overperformed and that kind of thing. I think if he then brings in competition for Tyrone Tracy, he's almost saying that guy that I was holding up as a really good draft pick that I got on day 3 isn't actually that good. And I think he needs Tyrone Tracy to be a hit. As much as, he needs to nail this draft, he needs Theo Johnson to produce, he needs Malik Neighbors to continue to be a superstar. I think Tyrone Tracy is potentially one of those guys that if he can be an above average starting running back, that could potentially help Joe Shane keep his job beyond 2025 season. So I'd be gobsmacked if they bring him in. You said about Devin Singletary, they save, I think it's 250,000 if they release him. He's about 6.25 mil on the cap. Like they're not releasing him because they're not going to be able to bring in somebody for the money that they save. So he's there. So the fact that they've got Devin Singletary under contract, they've got Tyrone Tracy, I'm kind of like, they've got so many other holes on the roster. And the way Joe Shane kind of needs the draft picks to produce, I'm like, I expect Tyrone Tracy to just be left alone and say, right, you're our kind of 1A, Devin Singletary's our 1B. yeah, we might add in like a late day 3 back or a UDFA or something like that. But I don't expect them spending any sort of competent resources at the running back position, which to me is really exciting because Tyrone Tracy's profile, as you said, I think his explosiveness, I think the way he runs is really exciting. I'm really excited about the usage. It feels like it's a trope where you talk about running backs being used out wide and in the slot as wide receivers, and it sort of gets hyped up in the offseason. You get to the season, and it never happens. And it's like, oh, it would be used. I remember there was the Duke Johnson game when he was with Cleveland, where week 1 he lined up like 40 times in the slot, and then week 2 he was back to just playing running back snaps. But Tyrone Tracy lines up sort of 10 to 15% of the time as a wide receiver. You think there was multiple games last year we had over 10 snaps as a wide receiver. Like, that is significant. Yes, the receiving totals aren't massive, but 38 targets on the amount of snaps he played is competent. And I do think that there is a world where, look, in fantasy, we're chasing at the running back position touchdowns and targets. Those are the two most important things to me. And I think there's a world where he's the goal line back and he's getting some really interesting receiving usage. So I think he's undervalued. He's a player, price running back 17. I'm quite happy paying that price. If you can tell me that I'm having to pay 202, 203 in the current draft to go and take a flyer on Tyrone Tracy, that's a move I'm very comfortable making. I feel like it's low risk but potentially high upside. Are you happy paying that sort of price to go and acquire him right now?
I think I am, Rich. I also have him ranked running back 17. And I was sort of looking at what might be commensurate value for, like, I think 201 is probably right. Maybe 112 even. Like I think I would be willing to give up 201 for Tyrone Tracy.
Yeah, I've just looked at my values. So I've got him worth exactly the 112 in
112,
a stock
sure.
drive. So yeah, I think you're in that spot, aren't you? Yeah, I would love to, just because it feels better paying a second for running back than a first. I'd much rather pay the 201. But yeah, if push came to shove, I'd happy pay the 112 for him right now.
Yeah, but what you said, I mean, like his potential is a movable chess piece. I mean, really, I think the only thing that could threaten his workload would be if the Giants landed a bullseye with a late day 3 pick. And there are some day 3 picks in this class who are going to land. The class is that good at running back, but it would have to be someone pretty good to displace Tyrone Tracy. It would have to be a Bucky Irving type find, I think, for the Giants.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing is that I think there's potential to grow for Tyrone Tracy. I sure as hell hope that they're going to invest in this offensive line, and hopefully that's going to make his life easier. I think, I'd be shocked if it's Drew Lock and Tommy DeVito under center again next year, and hopefully that helps, bring more potential touchdown equity and that kind of thing. So I think there is an upside to come from this offense, which could obviously help Tyrone Tracy as well. Going from 2 positives to a slightly more negative look, Jonathon Brooks, I felt like we had to talk about him as much as he hardly played. Obviously, the ACL injury, we've had some recent news that he's now had surgery, and it basically looks like he's not going to play at all in 2025. So we are now looking essentially his 3rd year in the league as the first time we can kind of see him on the field. Is there any hope for him as a fantasy asset, Pat, or are you happy to get out and just get some sort of asset back for him right now?
If I had him, and I think I actually might have him on one of my teams, I would take a 3rd rounder for him right now, Rich, and that's pretty sad. But yeah, and there have been running backs who have managed to overcome multiple ACL tears. I think Steven Davis might be before your time, but he was a pretty good running back for Washington and Carolina, I want to say, who had a couple of ACL tears and wound up having a pretty productive career after that. But man, it's just plus the fact that he was maybe a little slower than expected coming back from this, because now an ACL is typically not a full 1 year recovery. It did take Jonathon Brooks a full year, and then for him to re-tear it so soon after. It's just, yeah, I don't know. For me, I think I've got him now running back 40 in my dynasty rankings, and I'm pretty much out. I would love to see him beat the odds, come back, have a nice career, but it's just the athleticism was part of what made him so appealing, and you just wonder how much of the burst he's going to have when he comes back.
Yeah, I think for me, he's the kind of asset that I'm quite interested in acquiring right now, but it needs to be at a bargain price. If I can pay a third round pick for him, I kind of treat third round picks as basically like throwaway assets almost, in terms of I'll throw a third into a deal if it gets the trade done, sort of thing. So if I can buy him for a third and he can sit on the bench of my roster for probably 18 months now, and maybe in 18 months I can get a reliable fantasy option, or maybe I can he plays well in week 1 and I can sell him for a second or something like that. I'm kind of happy to do that, just because the risk is basically nothing. If keep trade cut, I've still got him as he's running back 25, a mid 2025 second. I think that's too rich to kind of take the flyer on, and I certainly can't do that. I mean, it's just really sad. Like, this is a guy, I was just looking right now. He was in May last year, he was running back 9 in ADP and value. Like, and this is potentially, a word of caution for anyone coming out in this year's class. Like, we do tend to get a little bit excited a little bit too quick on some of these prospects. But yeah, I think it's you can't expect anything from him as such. You almost it's an end of the bench flyer that if he turns into something, it's a bonus, but actually you can't look at him as anything more than essentially a waiver wire kind of dart throw type player. I talk about quite a lot about how I value, and I sort of have a squad of starters and then one backup in each position. So in a start 10, that's like 14 players, and that's my squad that I build around, and the rest of those roster spots are just dart throws, and I'll churn those dart throws as much as possible. And he's absolutely needs to be in that dart throw territory, not that kind of core squad, because I don't think you can rely on him even being fantasy relevant at the start of 2026, because I imagine the Panthers are probably going to ease him back in very slowly, off the back of a second surgery, obviously.
Yeah. And I would say injured reserve rules in your particular league matter here as far as your willingness to invest. I know there's some leagues that are pretty restrictive and might only have a couple of injured reserve spots. I play in one league that has no injured reserve spots. You have to, if you want to keep an injured player, you have to carry him on your active roster, and that can be pretty penal for these longer term injuries. So, yeah, I mean, if you're allowed to park 5 players on injured reserve, the level of investment and the level of risk seems pretty minimal. But yeah, at this point, boy, you're just kind of hoping that he can come back at something close to the prospect he was coming out of Texas.
Yeah, absolutely. Because he was so good to watch and so fun, and yeah, you just hate to see it. The guys, at least I guess at least he's got an NFL contract. There's guys that have multiple surgeries in college and then never get that contract. So at least he's kind of had that. But we're going to move across to the, I guess, other players category of the show now. So we've talked about probably the 3 biggest names. We're going to talk through 3 players at a time, and I've sort of tried to group them in some sort of order as to how we'll talk them through. And this is, I guess I'm classing this as kind of handcuff territory with maybe a little bit of upside. So we've got Blake Corum here, we've got Trey Benson, Braelon Allen. All 3 of them are looking like they're going to be the RB2 behind a fairly established fantasy RB1, obviously slightly different age scales in terms of James Conner to Breece Hall. Is there any of these 3 that you're particularly intrigued by potentially being more than just a handcuff, or do you think they're all destined to basically just be one injury away type players?
I think that is how we have to regard them for 2025, as being one injury away. I think all 3 of these guys fit into the I'm intrigued, but I'd certainly like to see more class. And, I'll mention Braelon Allen, since I am wearing a Wisconsin sweatshirt, having attended Braelon Allen's school. And by the way, happy 21st birthday today as we record this, Rich, on Monday, January 20th. Yes, Braelon Allen played his entire rookie season at age 20, not of legal drinking age here in the U.S. So that's pretty interesting. I mean, he was the youngest player in the entire rookie class last year. And, over the first 4 weeks, he was averaging 4.8 yards per carry, and it looked like he might actually be a threat to Breece Hall's workload. From week 5 on, Braelon Allen averaged 3.1 yards per carry. So we might have gotten out over our skis a little bit with the Braelon Allen enthusiasm early in the season, but ultimately the sample size was pretty small, 92 carries, 19 catches. I think you have to be intrigued by a 235 pounder who's not slow. And isn't a complete zero as a pass catcher. I don't think that's ever going to be his forte. So he's intriguing. And then Trey Benson, a guy who I didn't necessarily love as a prospect. I thought maybe went down a little too easy on some of the college tape I had seen, but I don't know. The more I saw of him behind James Conner in Arizona, the more I liked him. And he had that nice, I think it was a 2-game stretch of midseason. Looking at it here. Oh yeah. Against the Bears and the Jets, where he looked pretty good. I think that was early November. Like we saw that really appealing combination of size and speed. Yes, still a backup, but still room for optimism with him. And maybe kind of the same thing with Blake Corum. We've certainly see smaller running backs succeed in Sean McVay's offense. But obviously he's got a big obstacle in his way with Kyron Williams.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing with Trey Benson, which I still can't quite get my head around, is that as soon as Trey Benson saw some playing time, looked good, that was the point at which the Cardinals then offered James Conner the extension, which, I'm a huge Jay Conner fan. I think he's fantastic, but it was just strange timing that it was like, this running back that you spent draft cap on suddenly looked competent, and then you're going to offer that extension to the vet.
Yeah. Also, Rich, I want to say, like, starting the season, he was basically third on the depth chart. Behind was it DeMercado?
DeMercado,
yeah. So it took him a while, it seemed like, to win over the Cardinals, and I don't know that he has fully won over the Cardinals just yet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think for me, I'm viewing Benson as purely a handcuff. I think them paying money to James Conner, the whole regime is coming back. Like, I don't expect this offense to be anything other than very James Conner centric. Obviously, James Conner, not that, pretty much misses time every single year. He's another year older. The running back position, injury rate's 100%. Like, I think there is a greater than zero chance that James Conner is injured at some point. And hopefully at that point in his second year, Trey Benson could be a true handcuff. Whereas I think this year, if it had happened, it probably would have been a bit of a split between, he, DeMercado, Michael Carter still floating around. The Blake Corum one is really interesting for me because I see what he could be in this offense, and I think he could be a really usable back. And I'm a big Kyron Williams fan. I really like him. I know that Sean McVay absolutely loves him. But these fumbles are really starting to kind of be something, aren't they? There was a times in the season where he got benched at one point and sort of missed a quarter and stuff like that. And it feels like it's starting to seep in. And then obviously, in the playoff game we've just watched, key fumble when the Rams kind of need to go down and kind of hopefully try and win the game. He fumbled and it basically cost them the game. So I do wonder if there's a world where we start to see Blake Corum maybe be a little bit more of that 1B to Kyron Williams' 1A that we were expecting this year. Maybe we're sort of a year behind in that aspect.
And we have seen Sean McVay use his running backs unpredictably, as with a couple of years ago when I was very much all in on Cam Akers. And, that I remember kind of watching in horror in that Thursday night opener after I'd spent the entire offseason touting Cam Akers, and all of a sudden he's on the bench watching Darrell Henderson take 20 carries. So stranger things have happened, but like, it wouldn't take all that much perhaps for Blake Corum to get his shot.
Yeah, but the one I'm really intrigued of these three, though. So Braelon Allen, so bear with me on this. I think a lot of people have viewed Braelon Allen as, well, he's stuck behind Breece Hall. And I think that people are taking that as a given. I appreciate I'm a Jets fan, but there is a lot of talk in Jet circles that Breece Hall could be the one to be traded. Now, the Jets have got a hell of a lot of contracts due up right now. So they've got Garrett Wilson. They've obviously got Jermaine Johnson, who's a defensive end. They've got, I'm blanking on this, Elijah Vera-Tucker as well. Sauce Gardner. They've drafted reasonably well, particularly at the high price positions. And I do wonder if there's a world where new offensive coordinator coming in, new regime, the Jets haven't got much money because they're going to be paying big dead cap hits to Devontae Adams and Aaron Rodgers and Alan Lazard and all of Rodgers' cronies. I do wonder if they view it as, right, the Jets aren't going to compete in 2025. We still don't have a quarterback. So, look, Garrett Wilson is a centerpiece, Elijah Vera-Tucker, Sauce Gardner, Jermaine Johnson. Do we really want to pay Breece Hall to the point that by the time we're probably looking at a competitive team, he's going to be potentially aging out? And I wonder if they're looking at it saying, if we could get a third-round pick for Breece Hall right now, we've got Braden Allen, we've got Isaiah Davis, who could be a really competent 1-2 punch. And I just wonder, yes, I may be galaxy brain in this, and I'm probably, trying to look 5 steps ahead. But I think there's a greater than 0% chance that Breece Hall is traded. And if that happens, Braden Allen's dynasty value is going to absolutely skyrocket. So at the moment, I'm just looking at cost. He's pretty much a late 2025 second, maybe 2/3 is kind of his dynasty value. I think there's worse moves to make than going and spending 2/3 on a guy that could absolutely skyrocket in value.
The trade scenario does not seem all that far-fetched to me, Rich, because who do you want to spend your money on if you've got this rebuilding team? We've seen the devaluation of running backs in recent years, and Sauce Gardner, yes, we do want to re-sign our shutdown cornerback. Vera-Tucker, one of the few correct answers they have found on the offensive line in the last couple of years. Like, yes, I think maybe they might prioritize these guys ahead of Breece Hall and turn it over to Allen, who did handle a massive load at Wisconsin. He was the youngest player in last year's rookie class, and yet I believe he had more 100-yard rushing games than any other rookie running back in the class of 2024.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued by it, and I think that it could be a really nice compliment to Isaiah Davis as well, who's lightning quick, looks great as a receiver. So I do wonder if it could happen. I think worst case scenario, 2/3 for a handcuff in Braden Allen, that's not a bad move. But if you've got that contingent upside baked in, I think it's worth a dart throw. But we're going to move on to our next collection of 3. Now we've got Isaac Guerendo, Audric Estime, Ray Davis. These are kind of, I've sort of to label these as lesser handcuffs of, I don't think Ray Davis is ever going to win the job over James Cook. Audric Estime, who the hell knows who's going to win the job in Denver right now. And Isaac Guerendo, I think he showed a little bit, but we all know this is Christian McCaffrey. Is there any of these guys someone that you think could have some value, or at least a spike in value over the next sort of 6 to 12 months?
So the only one I'm not that interested in here is Audric Estime, kind of a plotter with 4.7 speed, not much of a pass catcher. I mean, he had 5 catches this year in Sean Payton's offense. And we know how Sean Payton likes to use his running backs in the passing game. So I think he's kind of a role player at best. Maybe he can be a designated short yardage back, but I don't see much appeal for Dynasty, quite honestly. Guerendo and Ray Davis. I mean, I was a big fan of Ray Davis coming into last year's draft, just tough, versatile, a little bit of burst. But yes, as you mentioned, Rich, role is the big question. I don't see him passing James Cook either. I don't know if he's quite the running back that Cook is. And they like to use Ty Johnson too. And you've got a quarterback who often calls his own number, especially near the goal line. Yes, the touchdowns did more than even out for James Cook this year with him, setting the Bills, I think, rookie for running back touchdowns, but that was after a season in which he had 2. So, like, role is the issue, but I'm inclined to bet on the talent. I'm not going out and trying to acquire him in deals with his usage so ambiguous right now. But if I could maybe get him as a throw-in and a deal where we were close to an agreement, and I felt maybe I was giving up a little more than I was getting, and I saw that my trade partner had Ray Davis. That might be the throw-in I asked for. Guerendo is really interesting because he was Braelon Allen's backup for a while at Wisconsin and could not get on the field. And what little I saw of Isaac Guerendo, he seemed like the size speed combination was always very appealing, but I thought he was just kind of a straight line runner. Didn't really see anything to suggest otherwise, even after he transferred to Louisville and got into a backfield rotation in his final college season. But he showed more than that, I thought, this year. Like he actually was a pretty, I saw a little bit of creativity. So he averaged 5 yards per carry, limited sample size, 84 carries, but 4 touchdowns, some utility as a pass catcher. And, it's hard to beat 221 pounds and 4.33 speed. And maybe he's more than the straight line guy I thought he was. So, yes, he is very blocked at the moment, but he's blocked by a player who has endured injury issues throughout his career. And I know the 49ers are about to lose, I think, Jordan Mason in free agency. So it's very possible Guerendo opens up as the number 2 behind a guy who has missed a lot of games.
Yeah, I believe Jordan Mason's I'm frantically Googling it now. I believe he's a restricted free agent, but yes. I'd be shocked if they, spent to bring him back. I do quite like Isaac Guerendo. Again, it just comes back to price. Like for a 3rd round pick, I really like it. Yeah, Jordan Mason is a restricted free agent. For a 3rd round pick, I really like it. As you said, that kind of size speed combination. He's what Shanahan backs were 5 years ago. When Raheem Mostert was the Shanahan disciple and Jeff Wilson and guys like that, where it was almost exclusively outside zone runs and you didn't need any wiggle, you didn't need any vision because the scheme was kind of telling you where to go. I think again, it comes back to a similar conversation with Braelon Allen. If you're expecting or relying on any production, you need to be looking elsewhere. But I think for a dart throw, I'm happy to go with Guerendo. I think the 49ers are going to have a big bounce back year, and I'm going to want pieces of that offense at cost. So yeah, I'm happy to take a dart throw on that. Audric Estime, I think he had his chance. Sean Payton talked him up for 3 weeks in a row, tried to get him on the field, and he was just a plodder and did nothing. So yeah, I'm fine leaving him aside. I think they're going to bring in more options to that backfield, and I don't think Estime is an answer. Ray Davis, I just don't see the upside. I think at best he's like a number 2 back. He's in. Maybe this is disparaging him slightly. I think his ceiling is Gus Edwards in terms of he's a guy that's probably going to have good, yards per carry numbers because he comes in on certain downs. He's going to be good between the numbers. He's going to be good in short yardage situations, but he's never going to be a lead back because his profile is slightly restricted. And that's just not a guy that I'm chasing. If I'm chasing these dart throw running backs, I want upside. And I think that's what Guerendo is. So yeah, I'm okay taking a flyer on Guerendo. The other 2, I just don't really want any part of.
Yeah, that's fair. I might like Davis a bit more than you do, Rich, but I think we're in lockstep on Guerendo and Estime.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm probably slightly Taylor. I wasn't a big fan of Ray Davis as a prospect coming out, so I like the story, just not so much the player as much. But the final 3, I'm calling these the flash of talent, shall we say? I think we maybe saw one play from Kimani Vidal, maybe one game from Marshawn Lloyd, and then I think one run from Jaylen Wright as well. I think all 3 of these guys, you can tell yourself a picture that they're very talented backs that are in good offenses that could have a ceiling outcome, but they basically did nothing through their entire rookie years. So Marshawn Lloyd, Jaylen Wright, Kimani Vidal, any of these guys that interest you, any that you would be intrigued on going to take a flyer on right now?
Oh, well, I'm intrigued by Marshawn Lloyd, although I expect the Packers to bring back Josh Jacobs. The confusing thing about that was, I thought Marshawn Lloyd might actually have a role had he been able to stay healthy, because traditionally Matt LaFleur has been sort of a running back by committee guy. And even when he had a young Derrick Henry, he had Derrick Henry sharing work with Dion Lewis in Tennessee, which was kind of hard to believe. And that was certainly not the case this year. He pretty much turned the backfield over to Josh Jacobs, and it's hard to see Marshawn Lloyd muscling into the picture, especially since Emmanuel Wilson and Chris Brooks both look pretty good for the Packers in short, limited roles this year. So at the same time, I know Marshawn Lloyd was the favorite running back in last year's class of Daniel Jeremiah, the very astute NFL.com talent evaluator. So if he can stay healthy, maybe there's something here, something to take a flyer on down the road. And maybe if you drafted him last year, probably unfortunately with something like a second round pick, you want to just kind of hold on. And maybe if it doesn't happen for him in Green Bay, it could happen somewhere else at some point. And yeah, Vidal, he was a guy I liked a lot coming out of Troy, the all-time University of Troy leading rusher. And I thought the party was getting started, Rich, when he had that touchdown on the wheel route very early. It might have been like his first or second game. And then things just never got going. And he even had a pretty good opening as far as the chance to contribute, with Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins both missing some time, and it just didn't really happen. He kind of didn't earn it. So very much a question mark at this point, a guy who could be out of the league in 2 years or could be a contributor somewhere. Jaylen Wright's the guy I've trouble with. I think a lot of people like him more than I do. And there was a moment where I kind of saw the appeal and why so many other people liked him. And it seemed like early in the season, his role was starting to grow a little bit. He seemed like he had sort of muscled Jeff Wilson out of the picture, although maybe Jeff Wilson was hurt. I can't remember the exact details, but like there was this notion that he was going to cut into Devon Achan's role early in the season. And I don't think Jaylen Wright is like a 10th as good as Devon Achan. So I thought that was kind of a laughable notion. And I still think that. So maybe he could be Achan's primary backup, especially with Raheem Mostert being pretty old by running back standards. But I don't know. I haven't really seen enough of Jaylen Wright to really get me all that enthusiastic. And I even have him in one of my leagues. So I don't know. Jury very much out on all three of these fellows,
yeah,
I would say.
Absolutely. I think for me, I'm with you. I mean, I think we're in lockstep with Jaylen Wright. I've never understood it. Last year as rookies, everyone was hyping him up and everyone was super excited. And then he went to the Dolphins and everyone got, so over their skis. And I was just like, I just don't see it. I just don't get it. Okay, yes, he's fast. He can run in a straight line, but I don't see any vision. I think his contact balance is poor. Like, I just don't get what there is to be excited about. I think he's a good athlete. I don't think he's a good NFL running back. Yeah, maybe he's now the 1B in that offense. Probably, well, he's definitely the 2, isn't he, behind Devon Achane? But yeah, I just don't get it. I mean, he's the most expensive of the bunch quite considerably. He's ahead of all three of the last guys that we just talked about. So he's ahead of Guerendo, Ray Davis, and Audric Estime in keep trade cut values, in ADP, and in everything. So yeah, I don't get it. I think that Miami scheme isn't what we thought it was probably 18 months ago. And I think unless they're going to significantly invest in some of the interior offensive line, I'm really worried about what that offense could be next year. So I just don't get the upside, and I'm happy selling at cost. I mean, he's running back 40 right now. You can get they're just saying a mid 2025 second. Like, give me that every day of the week over Jaylen Wright. I'd happily take the role again.
Yeah, players who come out of the University of Tennessee are very tricky evaluations for us dynasty managers. Josh Heupel might be the most clever offensive choreographer in the college game there is. And he puts his players in very good situation and gets like really talented athletic players. Cedric Tillman, Jalen Hyatt, Jaylen Wright. These guys are not untalented, but like they are largely a product of their system. And we're going to go through this dance again this year with Dylan Sampson, Rich, and he'll be a guy I won't know what to make of. It's getting to the point where I'm inherently skeptical of University of Tennessee players, and probably am not going to be the one to draft them in most cases.
Yeah, absolutely. I basically avoid them. The only one I've ever fallen for and been excited by is Cedric Tillman. And I felt like I had egg on my face last year, or after maybe the worst rookie year we've ever seen. And then I felt very vindicated and was victory lapping a good 4-week stretch this year. But on going back to the running backs, on the Marshawn Lloyd point, I really liked it. He was one of my highest drafted players in terms of best ball this year. I think I was about 20% ownership on him this year. I really thought he was going to have a role. I really thought he was going to be a piece, and it just felt like he just had the season from hell. It was about 4 different injuries. He just couldn't get healthy. He couldn't get on the field. He only ended up playing 1 game throughout the year, and I'm still intrigued. I still like the talent. I still think that's Josh Jacobs' contract, where it's basically year to year. The Packers can cut him at any point. I think that he's the kind of player that I'm intrigued by, and I'm happy to take a dart throw. And the good thing is he's the cheapest of these 3, and he's the cheapest back of anyone that we've talked through today. So yeah, I'm happy to take a dart throw on Lloyd, and I'll probably leave the 2 to other people.
Yeah, out of sight, out of mind with Marshawn Lloyd for a lot of people. So this probably is the time to float offers or try to work him in as a throw-in in some larger deal.
Absolutely, and I think you can get him dirt cheap. Like you're probably talking like a 4th or something like that. Like people aren't even thinking about him right now. So yeah, you can, as you said, you can get him as a free ad in most trades. But that is it. We've come to the end of the show. Pat, thank you ever so much for your time. If anyone watching this is silly enough to not know where they can find you, can you remind everyone where they can find you and find your work?
Of course, Rich, and thank you so much for having me on. It's always great to catch up with you. Love getting your takes on things and talking to you and throwing ideas back and forth. Always a pleasure. Please check out fantasypros.com. And since obviously people watching this are dynasty minded, please check out the Fantasy Pros Dynasty podcast. We are back to weekly after, we kind of take the regular season off, but now we're back. Just released a big show where we talk about the rookie class of 2025. So if you want some rookie talk, go look for the Fantasy Pros Dynasty podcast, and you will find our latest episode, which is chock full of rookie conversation.
Beautiful. And it is that time of the year. Rookie window is here. We've waited a long time, but it's finally here. We're going to be diving into the rookies very soon. Make sure you're hitting that subscribe on your way out, and we will be back very soon.